For the delay, had some internet issues here at the synagogue. Not sure what's going on with the internet around town, but it's not on. So having to do something different here unexpectedly. So Baruch Hashem. Everything's for the best. So here we are, and we're going to be on the 6th and 7th Aliyah of parsha Beha'alotecha. Thank God we have, other technologies, things that we can switch to when we run into issues such as this. So we're going to begin reading the 6th Aliyah and the 7th Aliyah today, which yesterday we left off with the new book of Torah, which I mentioned was chapter 10, verses 35 and 36, the Vayikra, the inverted noons. We talked about that yesterday. So the 6th Aliyah usually starts with that Vayikra. But now we're going to begin reading in chapter 11, just a couple of verses into the 6th Aliyah. And we're going to be in page 787. And then we're going to be chapter 11, beginning in verse 1. This is where we'll begin reading. It says, the people took to seeking complaints. It was evil in the ears of HaShem, and HaShem heard, and his wrath flared, and a fire of HaShem burned against them. And it consumed at the edge of the camp. The people cried out to Moshe. Moshe prayed to Hashem, and the fire died down. He named that place Taberah, for the fire of Hashem had burned against them. So the people already complaining against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And, one of the issues that we see in the wilderness, we talk about our forefathers coming out of Mitzrayim, having seen all these miracles, having had seen all the deliverance of Hashem, and within a very short period of time, they find themselves already complaining. And we have a tendency to look at that story, that type of thing, and shake our heads in derision and wonder how in the world can you complain so much after having seen such great miracles. And to a certain extent, it's a valid thing to say, because even though we experience God, we typically don't experience him in such an open, not always anyway, not necessarily in such an open manifestation. At the same time, we need to be careful that we don't speak against Chas v'Shalom too much, our ancestors in the wilderness, because how many times do we see God delivering us in the past? We can actually go back. I've encouraged us to do this not too long ago, in fact, to sit down and write out all the times that Hashem has delivered you, where you didn't know that you didn't know the way out, you didn't understand the path forward, but somehow, some way, Hashem found a way. It's a little bit like, and I don't mean this to be insensitive, but it's a little bit like these people that they talk about how they've had like COVID or whatever, and they're talking about how terrible it was and how horrible it was and how, oh my gosh, it was terrible. It was bad, and you better run out and get this vaccination because it was so bad. But I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but you're alive, right? I mean, you did make it through. And I don't mean to be insensitive, but I mean, I've had some really bad flus. I've had some really, in my lifetime, I've had some terrible sinus infections. I've had sinus infections that had me laid up in bed for days. And, but I lived. It's like we as human beings, we enjoy talking about the misery, but we don't like to sit down and think about what God has done for us. So basically what we need to do essentially is this. If you don't I want to encourage you something. If you don't use a prayer journal, I would encourage you to do so. I would encourage you to acquire a journal and write in it. The way that I use my prayer journal is it's just that. It is, in fact, a prayer journal. It's not necessarily for journaling for my thoughts per se, although that's perfectly fine. But the way in which I use it is it's more or less me writing letters to God. I happen to find that very powerful, very soothing. Naturally I pray, of course, but then I sit down, usually daily, not necessarily every single day, but I sit down and I will write my letters to God. Sometimes I'll write out a psalm and pray through them as I'm writing. I'll transcribe a psalm into my journal, and then I'll talk to HaShem. I'll write him a letter. But then I also use the prayer journal to record dreams, to record visions. And I've also used it to write down, HaShem, this is what you've done for me in the past. I remember this situation where I didn't know how I was going to find my way out, but you delivered me supernaturally. And so it's powerful. You encourage yourself in the Lord. So I would encourage you all to do that. Why am I bringing this up? Because as we're looking at the wilderness, this is how we prevent ourselves from complaining against God. When we encounter a trial or tribulation, instead of complaining, oh God, why did you do this? Why did you bring me out into the wilderness to die? We should say, HaShem, I've encountered another challenge, and you're the only answer. You're my only hope. Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. God is our only hope. He's our only source. We've got to go to the source. We've got to learn to go to the source. Now, HaShem uses different things. He uses people, he uses circumstances, he uses whatever to deliver us from the problem. But our source is HaShem. And so journaling, I think, and the Rebbe has, of course, a Musar class that's going to start here in a couple of weeks. And journaling is going to be a big part of that. Few people prayer journal, and I want to encourage you to go out and get a journal and start doing that. And write letters to God. It's really powerful, I think. So it says here, the rabble that was among them cultivated a craving. And the children of Israel also wept once more and said, who will feed us meat? Now, again, that is who will feed us meat? As it says in the commentary here, there was no shortage of meat. The tribes of Reuben and Gad had enormous flocks. The talk of meat, it says here, was only a pretext for them to complain about the manna. In the more literal sense, it is true that there was meat, but it was probably too expensive to eat regularly, right? Whatever. The point is, maybe they had meat. They didn't want to bother with it. They wanted to say, hey, I'm tired of this manna stuff. Give us something better to eat. In any case, they asked for meat. But notice the phraseology it says here in the Torah. Me, the word me is who. It's a mem and a yud. Me, ya'aklenu basar. Who will feed us meat? Who will cause us to eat meat? Me ya'aklenu basar. The word basar meaning meat. Now this is also a indictment against Hashem. Who will feed us meat? Me yaklenu. Who will do it? Who? What do you mean who? Hashem. This is, and again, who is our source? Hashem. And he's feeding us supernaturally, but we don't like the supernatural means by which he's feeding us. So we want something else. Mi yaklenu basar. And it goes on to say, Zakarneinu et Haggadah asher nochala b'Mitzrayim. We remembered, that's the word, Zakarnu, we remembered the fish. Zakarnu et Hadaga asher nokal, that we ate b'Mitzrayim, in Egypt. We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt. Free of charge, by the way. Didn't cost us anything. What does it mean, free of charge? Well, it says here, again in the commentary, while in Egypt they had received food from their slave masters, fish from fishermen, fruits and vegetables from the farmers, fish was so plentiful in the Nile that it was virtually free. Alternatively, it says the Egyptians who would not give them straw for their work surely would not give them free food. These protesters meant that the food in Egypt was free in the sense that it came without any obligation to perform mitzvot. That's exactly right. That's the exact commentary that I wanted to bring down. The reason they said that the fish in Mitzrayim was free, it wasn't free. It cost them their freedom. The fish in Mitzrayim was not free. It cost them their independence. So what does it mean that it was free? What do they mean by Zakarnu et Haggadah, Hadaga, Slika, Asher Nokal b'Mitzrayim? It was the fish was free. It meant that the fish in Mitzrayim we got to eat, but we weren't obligated to keep the mitzvot. This is an age-old problem that people want the covenant, but they don't want the responsibility of the covenant. They want all the benefits, but they don't want the responsibility. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the psychological heart of the Messianic Gentile. I want all of the benefits and none of the responsibilities. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Because what does the Messianic Gentile say? Do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? Is this required? Is that required? That's like a husband saying to his wife, okay, we're going to get married. I'm going to be your husband. Do I have to do this for you? Do I have to do that for you? Is that required? Now, ladies, tell me, would you consider that a meaningful relationship? That your husband was only trying to do for you the bare minimum? Or gentlemen, let's put it on the guys, same thing. That your wife is only trying to do for you the bare minimum. She's only trying to do for you the bare minimum. And, she wants to maintain the marriage, or, you want to maintain the marriage or whatever, but you just want to do so with the bare minimum. By the way, somebody said the video is a little choppy. Sorry about that. It's no internet here, so we're trying to just use the airways. Apologize for the quality. Well, nobody in their right mind would say, oh yeah, what a great relationship that would be. It would be just fantastic if my spouse was just trying to do the bare minimum. And anything above and beyond the bare minimum, they would roll their eyes and say, oh, I have to do this. So you think about how God feels when you as a Messianic Gentile, again, I'm just trying to put things in blunt terms so that we can deal with them. A lot of times, we don't want to deal with it, right? So we get out there as a Messianic Gentile, you say to yourself, I want all the benefits of the covenant. I just don't want any of the responsibilities. I don't want to be told what to eat, what to wear, what holidays to celebrate, how to daven. I don't want to have to do this or do that. I just want the bare minimum. I just want to, abstain from idolatry, whatever that means. I don't want to eat meat, strangled, whatever that means. And I want to be, I want 4 laws. Just want 4. Rich, what do you mean it's not true? It is true. It's exactly what that means. I want all the benefits with none of the responsibilities. I want the fish in Egypt. Why? Because it's free. Free of what? Free of the mitzvot. 100%. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, onions, and garlic. But now our life is parched. There's nothing. We have nothing to anticipate but the manna. Think about that. We have nothing to anticipate but the manna. We have nothing to anticipate but Hashem's miraculous provision. But what does it take to get the manna? What do you have to get? What does it require to get the manna? It requires covenant. What does covenant mean, by the way? You can't have covenant if you don't have fidelity to the mitzvot. So people say, I'm not Jewish, I don't keep the mitzvot, but I'm in covenant. No, you're not. You're in delusion is what you're in. But you're not in covenant. Because who would say, I'm married to such and such a person, but I don't have any fidelity to them, and I don't have any responsibility to them, but we're married. No, you're not. No, you're not. That's the thing. Until you come into an alignment and come into right thinking and come into that truth of what it means, in that relationship, that's where covenant is. But we think that covenant is some type of, we don't like to define things. And that's what was going on in the wilderness. They wanted meat. So it says, now the manna was like coriander seed, and its color was like the color of the bedulach. The people would stroll and gather it and grind it in a mill or pound it in a mortar and cook it in a pot or make it into cakes. And its taste was like the taste of dough kneaded with oil. Then the dew descended upon the camp at night. The manna would descend upon it. Now, if you read the insights in the Midrash Rabbah, it's even worse because what you find is that the manna that we collected in the wilderness would taste like anything you wanted it to taste like. It was, anybody remember the Lost Boys from the, is it called the Lost? They're the Lost Boys, right? The Lost Boys from the Peter Pan. That was maybe the person who created the Peter Pan story. I don't know. Maybe they were Jewish, but the Lost Boys, they would eat this imaginary food, but when they imagined it, it would literally be food for them. So you eat this manna, it would be anything. You want the manna to taste like brisket, tastes like brisket. You want it to taste like manicotti, it was manicotti. You want it to taste like enchiladas, is enchiladas. Whatever you want, it should taste like that, right? So even worse now. So now, God, where's our meat? What are you talking about? Just go get the manna. If you want chicken, it'd be chicken. You want turkey, it'd be turkey. You want it to be orange duck, be orange duck. General Tso chicken, hey, here it is. But we don't want that. Why? So again, the question becomes why. So now it doesn't make sense. So if the manna tastes like whatever you wanted it to taste like, then why are you complaining? The answer is you're not really complaining about the manna. You're really complaining about the mitzvot. I was talking to someone the other day, and we were just chatting about the questions that people have about Lapid Judaism or, following Hashem, the mitzvot and so on. And I was explaining that through my tenure of doing this for more than a couple of decades now, I've found that very often people's questions really aren't questions. They are objections put in the form of a question. And it takes a little bit of experience and a lot of discernment to try to find out when someone is asking a question, are they actually asking a question, or are they really just throwing up an objection and they're not really interested in learning? And the reason this is important is because you can find yourself answering somebody's question, and the next thing you know, you're involved in some type of debate or argument. When you get to that stage, the best thing for you to do is to bow out, because at that point, you're dealing with somebody who's not really interested in learning, they're interested in debating, and that's never fruitful. Never fruitful. And so, in this case, we're asking for meat, but yet we have the manna. It'll taste like anything we want. So really, we're not complaining about the meat. That's the point. We're really complaining about the Torah. And that's the thing. A lot of times our questions are really objections. One way, by the way, that you can tell right away if somebody's question is really an objection, not really a question, Okay, here's one way to tell. Here's a telltale sign. Take this from somebody who has 24 years experience doing this. Somebody asks you a question, you answer it. And then you answer it, by the way, intelligently and concisely, and you have stuff to back it up and whatever. And instead of the person sitting back and going, oh, that's interesting, and contemplating about it and go, well, okay, let me read more about it, let me think more about that. And instead, they act like you didn't say anything, like they act like you didn't hear anything, and they just throw up another question. Now, if they do that, what that's called is called skeet shooting. So what they've done is they've just thrown up a clay pigeon, you blew it out of the sky, and they act like you didn't even hit it. They just throw up another clay pigeon. And eventually they'll run out of box of clay pigeons because you'll have shot them all out of the sky. And then what they do is that they just walk off the field and don't even say anything. So at that point you realize, so that's your clue. If you're dealing with somebody who has an honest question, when you answer the question, they'll be reflective about it, or they'll say, hey, that makes, okay, oh, that's interesting, or whatever. I'm not suggesting they have to agree with you automatically, but they'll at least acknowledge that you've answered the question, you've done so intelligently, and it's a matter of now reflecting upon it. If you answer the question and they just act like that you didn't say anything, that's where you've encountered a problem. And so that's where we get into this issue of, it's really not about the meat, it's about the Torah. So Moshe heard the people weeping. Now listen to this. The people are now weeping. They're crying over the meat. It's really pathetic, but I want us to try to internalize this for our own lives. How many times do we weep over such things? Moses heard the people weeping in their family groups, each one at the entrance of his tent, and the wrath of HaShem flared greatly in the eyes of Moses. It was bad. I bet it was. It's ridiculous. Vayisma Moshe et ha'am kohem lemishpachotav ish lefatav al chalo yasa'ar af Adonai ma'od. The wrath of HaShem flared greatly. Uv eine Moshe ra, and Moshe saw. That's what it means. Uv eine, he saw that it was bad. It was bad. Can you imagine the people just crying? Oh God, we don't have any meat. But how many times do we cry and cry and cry and cry and cry over such foolish things? It's really a lesson to us. This is not meant for us to look at the generation of the wilderness and say, wow, how foolish were they? It's for us to look at our own life and go, how many times have I cried over such foolishness? Instead of trusting God. So it says, Moshe said to Hashem, why have you done evil to your servant? Why have I not found favor in your eyes that you place the burden of this entire people upon me? So Moshe, the great leader that he is, he's still a human being, which is why we have to have a divine Messiah. And as a human being, he is experiencing now fatigue. This is why we need a divine Messiah, because Moshe was great. Moshe is amazing. I would not have been able to do one fraction of what Moshe did. Okay. And now we're starting to see him crack. We're eventually going to see him crack ultimately when he strikes the rock instead of speaking to it. He just gets mad. He loses it. Now, by the way, that had to happen. Why did it have to happen? Because Hashem had to prove to us that a human being can't save you. If Moshe had been allowed to go in the promised land, if he had been that perfect redeemer, then we could have said that a human being can save us. But when we see that Moshe, at the end of the day, he cracks. And I don't blame him. I would have cracked long ago. I don't blame him. Moshe's much better than me, much stronger than me. I'm not, all I'm saying though, is that a human can't save us. And so Moshe begins to crack a little bit here. Why have you done evil? And he makes a little bit of a sin. He's blaming God. Why have you done evil to me? To blame God For evil, I mean, think about it. Let's look at the verse. Verse 11, right? Verse 11. Listen. Or where to go? There it is. Vayomer Moshe el Adonai lama harei reota. Lama, like how could you do evil to me? Lavodecha, unto your servant. How could you do evil? Now, Hashem doesn't do evil, but that's what Moshe believed. Did I conceive this entire people? Moshe is kind of losing it here a little bit, right? He's starting to lose it. Hanochi hariti et koham. Did I conceive this people? Hazeh im anoki. Aren't they like they belong to you? Did you place Hazeh im anochi v'latei techem? Like you put this burden on me? Ki techamar alei ashau bechachekeka. You know that you put this the entire burden of this people on me. Did I conceive them? This entire people, or did I give birth to them? That you say to me, carry them in your bosom? So he's like, did I, like as a nurse who carries a suckling to the land as you swore to the forefathers? Where shall I get meat to give this entire people? Now again, Moshe is kind of falling into this trap because there's meat. Remember, they have flocks. Remember, there are goats and bulls and sheep. They have flocks. So now Moses is, again, Moses is great and amazing, and he's starting to crack. Where am I going to get meat for this entire people? He's asking. By the way, I've highlighted in my Chumash, each time the word meat is used, it's the word basar. And so far, basar has been used 4 times. Now, the reason I highlight this is because I want to show you something in a second. So it says here, verse 14, I alone cannot carry this entire nation, for it is too heavy for me. And if this is how you deal with me, then kill me now. Moses is kind of having like one of those I'd rather be dead moments. I don't blame him. I've thought the same thing. I'd rather just not live. I understand. I totally empathize. He's a human being. I'm a human being. This is why we need a divine Messiah. If I have found favor in your eyes, and let me not see my evil. Hashem said to Moshe, now listen to this, gather to me 70 men from the elders of HaShem Who you know to be elders of people and its officers, take them to the meeting and have them stand there with you. I will descend and speak with you there, and I will increase some of the spirit that is upon you and place it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of this people with you, and you shall not bear them alone. So Hashem is having mercy on Moshe. He's realizing Moshe is a human being. Not that he didn't know that already, but just saying. And he's decided, listen, I'm going to give you some help. Like I say sometimes, tongue in cheek, help me, Lord. And he's going to give some help. He's going to take some of the Ruach HaKodesh that's upon Moshe and pour it out onto the leaders, the elders. And then he says, to the people say, prepare yourselves for tomorrow and you shall eat meat. Now look at verse 18. Again, verse 18. Ve'el ha'am, tomar, say to the whole people, hit kadeshu lemachar ve'alaktechem basar. Say to the people, prepare yourself, right? And for tomorrow you should eat meat. Again, the word basar. So God is saying, I'm going to give you meat to eat. So it says here, for you have wept in the ears of Hashem, saying, who will feed us meat? For it was better for us in Egypt. So Hashem will give you meat and you will eat. There's a 5th basar. I actually didn't highlight it for some reason. There's the 5th basar. Okay? Not for 1 day shall you eat it, nor for 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor for 20 days, until the entire month of days, until it comes out of your nose. and becomes nauseating to you, because you have rejected HaShem, who is in your midst, and have wept before him, saying, why did we leave Egypt? Now again, HaShem brings it all home, because HaShem knows. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He's going to give us so much meat that we're going to get sick and tired of it. We're going to just get nauseated by it. And so, but what does Hashem say? Look what he says at the end. He's confronting them with what is their actual complaint. Their actual complaint is, you've rejected Hashem. That's the actual problem. And you said, Lama ze yazanu mimitzrayim. Why lema ze? Why did we, yazenu, leave mimitzrayim, Egypt? That is the ultimate thing. Why did we leave Egypt? They forgot what they were doing and why they were doing it. They let the cares of the world, in this case, their stomachs, get them into this predicament. So it says, Moshe said, 600,000 foot soldiers are the people in whose midst I am. Yet you say, I shall give them meat, and they shall eat for a month of days. Can sheep and cattle be slaughtered for them and suffice for them? Or if all the fish of the sea be gathered for them, would it suffice for them? This is like the fishes and the loaves stories with the Moshiach. Hashem said to Moshe, is the hand of Hashem limited? Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we need. You know, the drash tomorrow includes a gate of prayer that I'll try to do my best to explain tomorrow. But basically, it's making arguments to God, not manipulative, not arguing with God, but basically, it's more or less reminding him of who he is. And this is a wonderful thing to say to God, because it's in his Torah. Verse 23, where is it? Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, Hayad Adonai tikzar ata tireina yayikzeeka devari im lo. Is the hand of Hashem limited? That phrase, now you will see whether my word comes to pass or not. That is a wonderful thing to say to Hashem. Hayad Adonai tikzar. Is the hand of Hashem limited? When we're crying out to God and praying for things, Hashem, is your hand limited? No, it's not. So Moshe left and spoke these words to the people, and he gathered 70 men from among them and the elders and had them stand at the tent. Hashem descended in the cloud and spoke to them, and he increased some of the spirit that it was upon him and gave it to the 70 men, the elders. When the spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, but they did not do so again. Now 2 men were remaining in the camp. For whatever reason, these 2 elders were running late, and they were in the camp. And the name of one was Eldad, the name of the other was Medad. And the Spirit rested upon them, and they were among the recorded ones, but they had not yet gone to the tent, and they prophesied in the camp. And the youth, this is Joshua, ran and told Moses and said, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of Moshe, since his youth, spoke up and said, my Lord, Moshe, incarcerate them. So Joshua was saying, they shouldn't be prophesying in the camp. They're supposed to come here and prophesy. Now listen to what Moshe says. Moshe says, are you being zealous for my sake? Would that the entire people of Israel would become prophets, if Hashem would but place his spirit upon them. So that's a very important verse in the Torah. Because Moshe is saying that he would wish that the Ruach HaKodesh would fall upon Klal Israel, that everybody should become a prophet. Everybody should become a prophet. All right, excuse me 1 second. Rick, we are not Rich, or whoever it is. Rich, we are not a 2-house. The whole 2-house thing is a false doctrine. There's no such thing as the house of Israel, house of Judah. So we'll explain more about that later, though. Keep watching. May Hashem help you. There's only one covenant, only one house. All Jews are Israel. Doesn't matter if you're from Asher or whatever. You don't want to be associated with Israel anyway, by the way, people. Everybody's like, I'm Israel, I'm Israel. Look at what the northern kingdom was. First, the northern kingdom was not directed by God to become a northern kingdom. Messiah said there's one flock and one shepherd. He didn't say there was two houses. The whole northern kingdom started itself outside the will of God, and they were full of idolatry and full of rebellion, full of sedition. So it's really, really spiritually bad to identify yourself as a, quote, house of Israel. But the reality is Israel, Jew, and Hebrew are all synonymous terms. Always have been, always will be. It's a false doctrine. It's a false doctrine created by Gentiles because they don't want to follow the covenant. It's like living with a woman aside from marrying her. You want the cow, you want the milk for free. So why buy the cow? It's the old saying, right? This is the old Texas saying. And it's not a slight. I understand it. It's just me. All I try to do is try to get us to face our problems. It's like the AA meeting. You can't get delivered unless you realize you're an alcoholic. There's no sense in beating around the bush. Understand you have a drinking problem. Okay, we have a drinking problem. Baruch Hashem. Now we can deal with it. We have to face our problems. What Teshuvah is all about. We understand why psychologically we believe things and do things. Then now we can deal with it. The two-house thing, it's just anti-Semitism. That's all it is. You don't want to be Jewish. It's anti-Semitism. Once you realize that, you can deal with it and move forward and get healed. No such thing as two houses, a myth. So Moshe wants to pour out his spirit. I know we're over time, but I'm having fun. So it says here, Moshe said, "We were being zealous for my sake. The entire people should become prophets." All right, last thing. Finally, in verse 30, Moshe was brought into the camp, he and the elders of Israel. A wind went forth from HaShem and blew quail from the sea and spread them over the camp. A day's journey this way and a day's journey that way. They were drowning in quail. I want you to understand this. How much quail this was. I listened to a man. He was actually a pastor. He was talking about this. And he was talking about the amount of quail. He did some kind of math, and I wish I could remember exactly what he said. But I just recall that he was talking about it. I said, yeah, he's right. And so we did the math on it. It was this amazing amount of quail. So much quail. So it says here, oh, by the way, somebody watching from Colombia, bienvenidos. So it says a day's journey, a whole day's journey this way, a whole day's journey that way, 2 cubits above the earth. I mean, there were quail stacked on top of quail. The people rose up all day and all night the next day and gathered in the quail. The one with the least gathered in 10 homers. And they spread them out all around the camp. The meat was still between their teeth. They had not yet chewed when the wrath of HaShem flared against them. And HaShem struck a very mighty blow against the people. He named that place Kirboth Hatava because there they buried the people who had been craving. From Kirboth Hatava, the people journeyed to Hazeroth, and they remained in Hazeroth. Now, I'll end it here. We didn't get a chance to read chapter 12, but I'm going to make a quick statement about that in a second. But the thing I want to bring down is, notice I said there were 6 times that the word basar was used. Okay, quail is delicious. My dad used to be, and my grandfather both were quail hunters, and I hunted quail a little bit with my dad. But anyway, 5 times. Excuse me. Did I say 5? Or 6. Looks like 5. 5 times the word basar is used. So they're asking for meat. Finally, God decides to send them meat. But what was the meat he sent? Did I say 6, Cindy? Okay, 6. He ended up sending them quail. What does this teach us with respect to kashrus? It teaches us that God sees fowl as meat. It's a very important point to make, because We talk about the separation of meat and dairy, which is Torah law. It's not a rabbinic tradition. It is the separation of meat and dairy is not a rabbinic tradition. It is Torah law. But some people wonder, is fowl to be considered meat? And it's interesting because the Talmud actually says that the adding fowl is considered a rabbinic addition. And I brought this up to an Orthodox rabbi colleague of mine years ago. He didn't have an answer. He acted like it was the first time he'd heard it. I don't know if it was or not, but I said, it's interesting because, it says that fowl is a rabbinic addition, but actually the Torah identifies fowl as basar, meat. So if we're not supposed to have meat and dairy, which is actually what the verse says when it says don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, when you actually look at the Hebrew, it literally says don't eat meat with halav, dairy, which is dairy can be milk, it can be curds, it can be cheese, it can be yogurt, it can be a milkshake, it can be lots of different things. It's translated milk, but it's actually not an appropriate translation. It's like when you go to a dairy restaurant, a kosher dairy restaurant, a lot of times they'll say Halav Yisrael, which means the dairy used here. The dairy, halav just means dairy. The dairy used here is from Israel or made by Jews or whatever. So the point is, the reason I bring this up is because you need to know that according to the Torah, according to HaShem, fowl is meat. Fish is not, though. So you can have you can have fish with cheese. That's fine. And by the way, just to bring this out, eggs are also parv. They're not meat either. I know eggs are considered, they're in America anyway, eggs are classified as a dairy thing. Yes, chicken is meat. Yes, chicken as well. Chicken, duck, turkey, quail, hen, goose, pheasant, Cornish game hens. It's all basar. It's all meat. But eggs are not. Eggs are parv. So you can have cheese on your eggs. So like a cheese and egg omelet is fine. All right. I know we're way over time, but just real quick. You cannot have mac and cheese with chicken. No, you cannot. You cannot have mac and cheese with chicken. So chicken is basar. Chicken is meat. You're not allowed to have meat and dairy together, according to Torah law. You can have fake cheese, though. In America, there's plenty of fake cheese, like the cheese that's made with vegetables, whatever. Some of it's good. All right, real quick. I know we're way over time, but chapter 12, this is where Miriam and Aaron speak against Moshe. Now, there's lots of discussion about why this is the case. One of the reasons is because it's Moshe's wife was thought to be a black woman, a woman of color. And so maybe that had a little bit to do with it, perhaps. Maybe there's some jealousy there. Who knows what all the issues were? But what I really want to get to was Miriam gets punished for speaking against Moshe. Lashon hara is bad. Speaking Lashon hara against a leader is even worse. People say if you're a leader, you have great responsibility. That's true. And so therefore, when you sin as a leader, it's much more harsh. And that's true. We as leaders, we have a great responsibility. And when we fail, it's not pleasant. At the same time, the Bible brings down, and even as this is written about in the New Testament writings, to bring an accusation against a leader without hard, fast, evidence, like you saw it with your own eyes, you've got proof, is very, very dangerous for you. And that's really, really the case here with Miriam and Aaron. Miriam and Aaron, who are very close to Moshe. There's their sister and brother. What does HaShem do? HaShem chastises them. Because leaders have great responsibility, yes. And so therefore they're held to a stronger account. That's true. And as a result, I guess what I'm trying to say, hopefully I'm articulating this right. On the flip side of that, you're not allowed just to willy-nilly accuse them of stuff. So it kind of goes both ways is what I'm trying to say. Hopefully you understand that. It sounds a little bit self-aggrandizing because I'm a leader, and I don't mean it to be. It applies to me. It applies to anybody else. You just have to be very careful. And I don't want to see people bring upon themselves judgment because of that kind of stuff. It's very serious. Lashon hara is very serious in of itself. And we have to be very careful. But in this verse, was it 8? Yeah, in verse 8, just to conclude here, mouth to mouth do I speak to him in a clear vision and not in riddles. At the image of HaShem does he gaze. This is HaShem talking about Moses. Therefore did you not fear to speak against him? So it talks about at my image does he gaze. And that's in the as it says, ul temunat. The word there for image, interestingly, is the same word. If you look it up, it's the same word that's used for the image of an idol. What this tells us is that God has an image. And that Moses, when he went into the Holy of Holies, he was actually speaking face to face to a physical image. Who is that physical image? Messiah Yeshua, the Messiah of Israel, the divine Messiah. But what do we know? What do we know? End of our Aliyah today. I've gone way over on the time, but I don't know. I was having fun. So maybe it's because I got flustered with all the internet issues and didn't know what I was doing. I decided to just go with it. So hope you had a good time. Listen, if you're from the two house Hebrew roots thing, stick with us. You've been involved in a false theology, but we all have at one point or the other. You just have to stick with it. Don't be blinded by. Be willing to let go of what you thought was true. There's a story. I don't want to belabor my time, but there's a story about a little girl with fake pearls that she spent a lot of money for, and her daddy wanted to give her real pearls. You have to be willing to let go of the fake pearls in order for Abba to give you the real pearls. And if you'll just stick with it, it'll all make sense. And you have to let go of some things. And one of those things you have to let go of is anti-Semitism. Which, by the way, if you've never watched the anti-Semitism class, The History and Effects of Anti-Semitism, which I think may be on the Sar Shalom Synagogue YouTube channel, you really need to watch that. It's really a pre-read. Maybe I'll post that later if I can never get internet back here at the shul. Maybe if not today, some other time. Remember, the fast begins Sunday. We have a 3-day fast, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. We're fasting for Sar Shalom Synagogue and for Lapid Judaism, that everything that is a hindrance to people coming to this, whatever that hindrance would be, that HaShem should remove every hindrance and open up the gates for people to come to know the Messiah and to walk in the mitzvah. So we're gonna begin the fast Sunday morning at dawn, and then it'll last until sundown Tuesday night. So that's what we'll do. That way people can have Havdalah and so on. So we'll start Sunday morning at dawn, and then we'll end Tuesday night at sundown. We'll be fasting together, and all of us believing God, and let's really pour our heart and soul into this. Don't let it just be a fast like you're just doing without food. Let it be a time of real prayer and intercession and crying out to God for Him to remove every obstacle, anything and everything that prevents people from connecting with Him with the Lapid movement. All right. Shalom Aleichem. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Have a great day. Look forward to seeing you then.